Hello everyone, my name's Peter and I'm the Dungeon Doctor. Welcome to my video where we're going to count down 10 great things in the new Expert Classes 1D&D playtest material. This is just a video really almost a response to a lot of the hate that's coming out about this 1D&D already, talking about nerfs to the Ranger, Rogue and Bard classes. And honestly, I think there is far more good about this 1D&D playtest material than bad. And I'm here just to put a bit more of a positive spin on things. So without any further ado, number 10, fixing the help action. Firstly, we have a fix to the help action. Now you, instead of choosing any ability check to help with, this ability check must be one of your skill proficiencies. Specifically, when you take the help action, you choose one of your skill proficiencies and one ally who can see or hear you, and then you are able to give them advantage on that check. Previously, the help action didn't have this restriction on who could help with what, and you get into perhaps unrealistic situations where people were spamming the help action left, right and centre. Even in some actual plays, you would have familiars helping with certain activities. And some DMs would crack down on it, some wouldn't. At the end of the day, though, this is just a great common sense change to the rules, and I'm here for it. Number 9, suggested spells. This is just a really nice quality of life change for any new players who are looking to get into spellcasting. Now, when you look at the class features for a class, as well as finding that you've got the spellcasting feature, you get this lovely list of suggested iconic spells for that class. And so this takes actually a lot of weight off the DM when it comes to helping new players manage spell choices. Previously, it would often be the responsibility of DMs to introduce spellcasting, and you'd get into this weird situation where a DM is having quite a lot of control over what the player chooses, and in a lot of ways that takes agency away from the players. It also puts the DM in a weird situation where they can be a bit metagamey with what they're getting their players to choose, whereas with this, you've got the player's handbook just acting as this nice independent arbiter of what would be some good, solid advice to give to players. And I think that is very healthy for the game and just makes things a lot smoother with the character creation process. Number 8. Fixing half-caster spellcaster. Another great change is what it looks like 1D&D is going to do with spellcasters going forward, or particularly half-casters. Much like the Artificer who gained their spellcasting at level 1, it looks like the Ranger is going down that route too. And when they do that, any spellcasting levels they gain will contribute to multi-classing spellcasting in exactly the same way. So they're considered a spellcaster of level 1 at level 1 because you take the spellcasting levels, half them and then round them up. And I think it's just really nice that we're going to get this consistency between how Artificers, Rangers, and I'm going to take a wild guess and say Paladins work in upcoming editions. So I think that's going to be really nice. I think it's going to make the spellcasting feel just a lot better. One thing I always found with multi-classing between Paladins, Rangers and other spellcasters was it always felt like your spellcasting progression was really sluggish whenever you made those choices, and this is just going to create a lot more opportunities for taking these half-casters and blending them with these other classes. Number 7. Fixing Bardic Inspiration. So Bardic Inspiration is getting a nice buff and in a lot of ways I think a nice fix. Now you can use Bardic Inspiration as a reaction, and you can do this in one of two ways. You can use it to either boost the result of a D20 test, or you can use it to heal a creature immediately after they take damage. And I think this is a really nice quality of life change for bards. Previously, they'd have to use a bonus action to grant someone Bardic Inspiration, and the tricky thing is that would tend to get held onto for a while by that player, often forgotten or not used. Now you're really putting the power into the bard's hands to decide when is going to be a useful time to use that Bardic Inspiration. I think that's great for the bard. It gives them a lot more agency over how these Bardic Inspirations are used. It also makes it a bit better on their action economy as well, because they aren't having to spend their bonus action each round to hand these out in anticipation of when they might be used. Additionally, they can heal with Bardic Inspiration as a reaction, and I think this might get into some tricky situations with bouncing creatures back from 0 hit points, a bit like how Healing Word can do that very often. But I still really like the flavour that you're integrating this small bit of healing into the Bard class through uses of their Bardic Inspiration. Number 6. Fixing high-level play. So this playtest material makes 2 crucial changes to what's happening for characters as they advance to high levels. Firstly, their final subclass feature or their final class features are going to be granted at lower levels. For example, the kind of campaign capstone that was given to characters at 20th level, they're going to get that at 18th level, which means that they get to use these high-level class features for the last 3 levels of a campaign, which means that they actually get to see some decent usage out of them. Additionally, instead of getting a specific class feature at 20th level, they get an epic boon, and while you have suggested epic boons that you can gain at 20th level, there's nothing stopping you picking any of the epic boons you like, which means that you very much even the playing field between all of your classes in terms of what they can get as their campaign capstone, and I think that's really good for the game. It has this feeling of being granted something divine or otherworldly when you get to 20th level, and I think the idea that the whole party are gaining these epic boons in sync feels like a nice celebratory moment for the classes. I'm not sure if it's clear yet or not whether you get an epic boon when you multi-class between 2 different classes, and so this might be an incentive for taking a particular class all the way to 20th level. I'll have to dive into the rules a bit more, or maybe we may need to push for allowing that for multi-classing as well, but either way, I like how this levels the playing field between the classes. Number 5. Fixing spells. So in this Unearthed Arcana, we're seeing the first of 2 fixes to some problematic spells. We're seeing one spell, Bark Skin, get a serious buff, and another spell, Guidance, get a serious nerf, but also just a nice quality of life change. So, starting with Bark Skin, instead of just increasing a creature's armor class to 16 at a minimum, you are instead granting them temporary hit points equal to your spellcasting modifier plus your proficiency bonus. So this is going to work in a lot of ways very similarly to Heroism, except instead of adding your proficiency bonus to the temporary hit points as well, Heroism grants immunity to fear, whereas this is just kind of Heroism plus in terms of how it grants temporary hit points. And you've got the upcasting option of granting it to multiple players. So overall, this is just a really nice change to Bark Skin. It makes it feel very thematic as well. I know Jeremy Crawford talked about it being like bark growing on your skin and replacing itself to keep a character going when they normally wouldn't. And yeah, I'm liking the initial changes to spells. Meanwhile, Guidance, it gets a bit of a nerf and a buff. Instead of it taking an action to cast Guidance on a player to give them a d4 on their next ability check, you are instead using a reaction when they take an ability check. And I think that's nice. It feels a bit better in terms of how you limit it, because a reaction you only get 1 per turn, and you can potentially use it much more readily in battle that way. The big nerf is that a character can only benefit from Guidance once per long rest, and I think this is good. I think for most common parties, you're going to get to use Guidance, I think up to, well, if it's a party of 4, I think you can use it 4 times to give yourself Guidance and 3 other creatures. And I think that's really nice. I don't think you should really expect to be able to spam Guidance every day. I'd potentially say rather than once per long rest, maybe once per short rest, if it feels a bit too punishing for people who've really liked this cantrip in the past. But otherwise, I think limiting it is very sensible, because at the moment, Guidance spamming is problematic for the game. It slows down the game when everyone is constantly saying, I want to use Guidance, I want to use Guidance, and I'm definitely here for changes like this. I'm looking forward to what else they change, particularly stuff that they might do with the shield spell or conjure animals. So I think we're in good hands with spellcasting changes in the future. Number 4, Fixing Feats. With feats introduced in this playtest material, I think there's far too much to actually go through in one go, and it will be a video in itself to actually go through each one and talk about the balance. However, taken as a whole, I think they've done a pretty good job of rebalancing a lot of these feats. Firstly, I believe with no exceptions, all of them are half feats, granting you an extra +1 to one of your ability scores. Usually you get a choice of 2, some of them are just a single ability score you can increase. I think like the active feat gives you only a +1 to charisma. But in general, I think what they've done a great job is reducing the power of a lot of the past feats like Crossbow Expert and Great Weapon Master to make them fit into this half feat format. I think the one problem is a lot of people are going to be a bit sad that you're removing a lot of the risk reward mechanics from feats like Sharpshooter or Great Weapon Master. I think it might be a bit preemptive to say that we aren't getting those risk-reward features in any shape or form. I suspect we will see those as higher level feats, perhaps something that you get as a 6th level feat or an 8th level feat, 6th level being available to fighters, which feels right. I think if any class is going to get access to the kind of -5 +10 rewards, it should be the fighter, but we'll have to see as we go down the line. But yeah, at this point, feats in general, they are looking a lot happier and a lot more balanced against each other, and I'm feeling really happy about the direction that they're taking. Number 3, you get a critical hit, you get a critical hit, you get a critical hit. So one of the biggest controversies in the last playtest material was how critical hits were being handled, in that only weapon attacks would benefit from critical hits. You'd only get to double the number of dice rolled for the weapon damage as opposed to anything else associated with it, like sneak attack or smiting. And also there was a rule that effectively only player characters could get critical hits, and monster critical hits were no longer a thing. This made DMs and players alike angry. There was a real not nice word storm on the internet, and I think that's kind of called for, actually. I think it was a big misstep, really. Now, in fairness to WotC, they are saying that they want to trial lots of different iterations of the rules, and they knew that critical hits was going to be a bit of a controversial one, and some aspects to it might be popular, some bits might be very, very, very unpopular. But I think at the end of the day, I think everyone's going to be a lot happier keeping that rule and using it with the playtest material going forward. Number 2, Heroic Inspiration. This is an absolutely fantastic change from the last playtest material. Now, instead of getting awarded inspiration when you roll a natural 20, you're instead given inspiration when you roll a natural 1. In addition, not only is it a advantage roll that you call at the start of a ability check or any other D20 test, it's instead something that can be added retroactively. I think there's maybe some wording that can be cleaned up a little bit, so instead of saying advantage, it should say maybe you get to re-roll one of the dice made on that check so that you can potentially improve a disadvantage check, for example. But ultimately, it's just a really, really nice quality of life change. It's getting much more in line with how the D&D community as a whole uses inspiration, i.e. retroactively. Also, there's this nice wording change here where it says that heroic inspiration could be awarded to a player character who's done something particularly heroic or in character. So in character makes it much more in line with how inspiration used to be awarded, in line with character bonds and ideals and flaws, which I think that was actually a pretty good system. I liked how inspiration worked with that. But also, last time in the playtest material, it said you could get inspiration for doing something particularly amusing, and that felt a little bit weird. It felt like it was asking players just to fool around at the table. Instead, it's now saying when they do something particularly heroic, and I love that. I really, really like in a D&D game when player characters are actually pushing themselves beyond their limits to do something heroic. Maybe they're doing something not ideal for themselves, not because it's going to give them any kind of benefit to themselves, but because maybe there's an NPC that they care about, and they're really putting themselves out there, doing something heroic, and those are the moments where I think inspiration is really earned. So I think all three of these changes are really good quality of life changes, and I'd actually be really excited to see this interpretation of inspiration make it into the final player's handbook. And finally, number 1, unique spell lists. I think one of my biggest fears that the 1D&D playtest material presented last time was this idea of 3 core spell lists: Arcane, Divine, and Primal, and how this might affect spellcasting going forward. In particular, they said that bards would pick from the Arcane spell list, and I think a lot of people assumed that would mean that they'd have access to every single spell that the wizard has. And that would feel a bit inappropriate. I did a video suggesting that, every bard's suddenly going to take Fireball. And I am pleased to say this is absolutely not the case. Instead, you get to pick spells... Instead, you get to pick spells from the Arcane spell list and then a subset of different schools of magic. And I like this interpretation a lot. It really helps add a lot of logic to how the spellcasting classes work. Now, rather than just having a random assortment of different spells, the schools of magic have a strong role to play. So, in the case of Bard, it must be from the Arcane School of Magic, and then you get to choose from either Divination, Enchantment, Illusion, or Transmutation. And all of those schools of magic make a lot of sense. And something I wasn't expecting was kind of like WotC to cheat a little bit on this. So normally these schools of magic would rule out spells such as Shatter, for example, from the Bard spell list. And I think that was why I was thinking this particular route might be problematic, because you'd be introducing nerfs to the Bard class or other classes in this way. But actually, they have had their cake and eaten it, because as well as limiting you to these schools of magic, they've actually changed the school of magic of a lot of the Bard spells just to fit the old spell list into this mold. Now, I don't know if they done this for every single spell, but Shatter was the one that I was really thinking about. I think they've also done it for Thunderwave as well, and in both those cases I think they've changed it from being an evocation spell to a transmutation spell, just so that the bard can continue to cast them as part of their spell list. And okay, I can see it as being a little bit cheesy to change something like Thunderwave from evocation to transmutation, same for Shatter, but I don't know, I think it does make some kind of sense, and I think this is just a good way of just introducing that logic to the game system. So I think that's great. Oh, and also the way that bards are getting their healing spells is as a second level feature, which gives them a few more healing spells. So we've got Healing Word, Lesser Restoration, Mass Healing Word, Freedom of Movement, and Greater Restoration. I haven't checked the bard spell list to see if any healing spells are missing from that list. I think potentially Cure Wounds might be missing, but honestly, just having a selection of the healing spells feels like it satisfies the requirement that bards should still have at least some healing. And so I am very confident now that spellcasting is not effectively going to change that much. We have seen some other changes as well with regards to how both bards and rangers get spells. So they have a number of prepared spells which they can change on a long rest, and the number of prepared spells they have equals the number of spell slots they have. I think this might get into a bit of a confusing situation for new players where they might expect a prepared spell is expended when they spend their spell slot, because I've had a lot of new players come in with that expectation before. However, once you get past that complication, I think they've actually managed to simplify the spellcasting pretty well. Perhaps made it a bit too powerful, but we'll have to see. But overall, I'm very, very happy with the changes to spellcasting. a lot of my worries have just been put to rest. So that completes my video on 10 things that I really love about the new Expert Classes playtest material. If you agree, disagree, please let me know down in the comments. I'm very interested to find out what you all think about it. And also, just putting that call to action out there, please do like, subscribe, comment. I pretty much respond to every single comment that I get, so please do keep that up, and I really love to see them all. So thank you everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next time.